So the property you're under contract for appraised $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 less than what you have in your contract. What do you do? That's what we're talking about today. So if you are in this situation or if you want to learn more about appraisals, let's get into it. Let's first talk about what an appraisal is. So if you are getting any type of financing, a loan that is a conventional loan, FHA, VA, USDA, any type of financing, usually it is required that you are going to get an appraisal. And basically what happens is the lender or the bank that you're using during the transaction process will order an appraisal. It's typically outsourced, like it's a third party type of situation, because there can be no biased opinions from the buyer agent or the selling or the listing agent. And basically what happens is a certified appraiser, if it's a company that your local lender or your bank is using, they typically have like a list of appraisers that they typically pull from, and the appraiser will go out to the property and the appraiser will do an appraisal. That's a tongue twister right there. But they typically will go out to a property, assess the interior, exterior, the neighborhood, pull comps, and they will be able to pull together a report saying what the value of the home is based on the conditions and other comps in the area. Now, during COVID, there were some specific situations where appraisers were not actually going out to the property because there was a new protocol that they didn't have to actually physically go because of COVID. They would just pull market comps and kind of do like a virtual appraisal, which sometimes wasn't always the best indicator of the value of the home, but that's just what typically was happening just because of that specific time. But a lot of appraisers are actually going physically out to the properties now. So with the appraisal, typically in your contract, there is an appraisal contingency that is built into the contract. It's usually like an exhibit that's attached to the purchase and sale contract that your realtor should fill out and should have a timeline that reflects a good amount of time for the appraisal to be ordered, to be completed, and for the report to come back in and for the whole situation to be assessed. So it's really important for you as a buyer to be educated that who you work with is very important, because these timelines are crucial. Because if the property does appraise less than what you have in the contract, you're not willing to pay any type of appraisal, which means if the contract price is $300,000, but the property only appraises for $280,000 and there's a $20,000 difference, the bank, the local lender, whoever you're working with is only going to give you the loan for the value of the home, so the $280,000. So if the seller is not willing to come down $20,000, then either you pay that out of pocket or you terminate. And that's why there's an appraisal contingency in your contract to protect you. If the seller is not willing to work with you on the numbers, then you typically will have the right back to get your earnest money back, and you're able to terminate and move on from that property. That's not always the case with the appraisal contingency and earnest money and how that works, but that's just typically something that is built into the contract to protect you. So it's really important to be educated about that. So what happens if the property does appraise lower and you're trying to figure out what the heck do we do? Do we terminate? Do we try to work with the seller? In the market currently right now, it's still a seller's market. It is shifting, but there still are a lot of properties that are getting multiple offers. And by multiple, I mean like 2 to 5 offers, but still you have competition. So if the seller is not willing to budge because they know that there was a lot of interest in their property and they are willing to put it back on the market, that may be something that you have to consider. If you have the extra cash and you really want this property and this property is like 100% the home that you've ever dreamed of, then I would say that that's a hard conversation that you have to decide if you're willing to pay any type of appraisal gap. Sometimes sellers are willing to meet you in the middle. The buyer will pay half of the difference and the seller will pay half of the difference. Sometimes the seller will come all the way down because the buyer doesn't have any extra cash to be able to pay any type of appraisal gap because they're covering closing costs or whatever the case may be. I recently had a contract where the property did appraise much lower. It was due to the fault of square footage miscalculation, and it appraised way lower than what we had in the contract. And the sellers had a really, really tough time figuring out if they were gonna terminate because the appraisal came in so much lower and they weren't expecting it, or if they were gonna move forward. So in this specific situation, the seller was always gonna be facing this problem. So at the end of the day, they decided to move forward with it. and they still were making a profit, but it just wasn't what they were expecting. So if you're a seller watching this video and you're running into an issue with appraisals, just know that sometimes a buyer can have a second opinion, or they can challenge the appraisal that was previously done, especially if it doesn't make sense at all. Like the comps are all showing that it's at market value. But if you're really pricing the property way above just because you're trying to get the most amount of money, and then it doesn't appraise and all the comps are showing that, you know, it actually is not worth what you listed it at, then it's really tough to sometimes swallow that pill, like I have to reduce the price. But if your end goal is to sell the property and you're still making a profit, or you're breaking even, or you're meeting your goal, it's just a little bit outside of what you were expecting, then that's just something that you have to decide if it's worth it or not to you. I just want to reiterate that our team services the Savannah, Augusta market currently. If you have watched one of our videos and you feel connected to this agent and you want to work with them, just know that we have a Calendly link in the description bar below. You can click on that link and schedule a call with any one of us if you are looking in a specific area to purchase, relocate, or sell your home. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next week.